Marcus Aurelius said, "What we do in life echoes through eternity." What is your life echoing through eternity? Welcome to Echoes Through Eternity with Dr. Jeffrey Skinner. Our mission is to inspire, engage, and encourage leaders from across the globe to plant missional churches and be servant leaders. So join us and hear the stories of servant leaders reverberating lives as God echoes them through eternity. Brought to you by Missional Church Planting and Leadership Development and Dynamic Church Planting International.
Welcome into Echoes Through Eternity. What is God echoing through your life? I am, as always, grateful that you're listening today. If you find this content helpful, please share with your friends, like and subscribe wherever podcasts are found. I am excited about our guest today in the studio. I have Bellomy, Reverend Brad Bellomy, with me. He is an ordained elder in the Church of Nazarene. He has a master's in religion as well as organizational leadership and has completed coursework for master's in social work. He has been serving in ministry for over 24 years, has served in various capacities, including youth and family ministry. He is currently the lead pastor at Mosaic, Atlanta in Little Rock, Georgia. He's led revitalization efforts in several churches and has had tremendous success navigating some very challenging contexts. I have had several guests on my show in the last few weeks, but I am very, very grateful to have Brad in the studio. If there was ever a voice that God is echoing through eternity, it is Brad's. He has profound leadership insight. Welcome, Brad.
Thanks.
Remind me, how many cultures does Mosaic have?
So at this point, we have people that were born in over 17 different countries. A lot of those are from Central Africa. We are 10 miles from Clarkston, which is a suburb of Atlanta. And last I heard, it was the largest concentration of Central African refugees per capita in the United States. We also have people from, England, Guyana, the islands. It's just a beautiful place.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, you just led Mosaic, which was previously named Harvest Community, through a rebrand. Unpack that a little for me and help us understand your thoughts as to your thinking as to the purpose behind that. What are some of the challenges that you faced in doing that? And did you experience any resistance?
Yeah, I think what's important about our rebrand is that we didn't start with a brand in mind and then try to sell that to the congregation. What we did was we started by taking a close look at what God's up to in our specific context and then seeking a brand that would name what God is doing. I prefer to do it that way. Once we named what God was doing in the place here, we were really intentional about the process. We made sure, first of all, that the area was not saturated with churches named Mosaic. And then we compiled a strategic plan, and we named a strategic planning team that would carry the process, the presentation, all the way through to completion. So once the board approved the name change, we had this really great day at Harvest. It was Harvest back then. It's the second time I've done a service like this, and it's just a bright spot in this whole process for me. We called it the story of harvest. And so what we did was we began just by celebrating everything that God's done in that church, looking at the pastors and how each pastor contributed to the life of the church. We sang songs of celebration. We took in, I think it was like 45 members. It was just an incredible day. It was a lot of fun. And once we celebrated what God had done and what God is doing now, then we turned our eyes toward the future and we presented this name change. We talked to them about why. We didn't just say, we want to change the name. we talked to them about why. We want to name what God is doing here. We're so excited about what God's doing in this location. We want our name to sort of tip people off to what God's doing. And, if you want to dig into that a little deeper, you can. But once we presented it to the church, we gave them 2 weeks to pray about it. A couple of people said, "Are you sure you want to do that?" 2 weeks to think and talk and pray about it. But we did. And we also gave them the opportunity to come and talk to us about it if they'd like to, or if they had any issues with it. And once we took that vote 2 weeks later, it was a 96% affirmative vote. to become Mosaic Church Atlanta. And that statistic is important to me as an individual and a pastor, because I believe in doing hard work to bring people along. I think a lot of times I see great ideas in the church, phenomenal ideas, and you can just literally restart and grow. But I've always been concerned about the people that never did come along. They just sort of got cut off, and we've had considerable success in helping people to come along, even people that weren't crazy about ideas to begin with. It's hard work, but we've done the hard work to bring everybody along with us.
That's good. As you were talking about leading that process of change, I thought about, I've heard other leaders talk as they were leading change, said you want to honor the past, celebrate the present, and envision the future.
Yeah.
And it sounds exactly like what you guys did there. You recognize there's going to be some loss, particularly possibly even identity. That sounds strange to say, that people would have their identity invested in a name, but they do. That they get their identity invested in the color of carpet sometimes in a church. I'm not sure why, but they do. So talk a little bit about that. Did you have any resistance to it? You said 96% in favor. What about that 4%? I've been in places where you had a 96% positive, but somehow or another that 4% ended up torpedoing the idea.
No, the 4% was fine. They just weren't voting in favor of it. I actually know who they were. One reached out to me the next week and said, "Hey, I just want to apologize. After hearing the presentation and thinking about this and praying about it, I should have voted yes." And it was just an interesting thing. You mentioned not really being sure why sometimes people feel that way about things like carpet. And I think about music. Music's the hot topic, the hot button. I'll be honest. I think that some of us, I guess I'm not technically a younger pastor anymore. I'm 46, but I think people in my generation, we don't stop to think that the carpet was there when these people accepted Jesus. They knelt on that carpet. Some of the older songs for them, those were the songs that the Holy Spirit used to speak to them. And it's hard to let go of that. Can I tell you a story real quick? When I was at Columbia First Church, I was a family pastor. It was a large church, and we were taking the church through some really intentional change. And there was a charter member. I think it might have been one of the only 2 charter members of the church left there. And her name was Mary Brown. And one day at the end of a service, she came up. We had this high platform, and so she came up. Her head barely cleared the platform, and she motioned for me to kneel down there. She said, "I want to talk to you." And I thought, oh, man. And so I knelt down, and she said, "I want to tell you something. I'm not crazy about this music." And I thought, oh, here we go. And she said, "But I recognize the Spirit." She said, "I'm not crazy about this. This is not my music." She said, "But I recognize the Spirit. It's the same Spirit that was at work in the 60s. I don't have any idea what she's talking about because I wasn't even around then. But she said, "I recognize the Spirit. And so I have a CD player, and I'll listen to those songs on my CD player." And I'm not saying we should relegate people to their CD players, but what I'm saying is that was a beautiful attitude. What she was able to communicate that, I'm not crazy about this, but I do see God working. I'm willing to let go a little bit. I think on our end, though, we do need to understand that, sometimes when I need to find peace of mind, there are places I'll go to where I experience deep peace of mind. And, when that's been the church for a lot of people, I just think we should be compassionate. Doesn't mean we don't make change, but I think we should sit and talk with people and honor the reason that they feel unsettled. For some people, church is the only thing that hasn't changed in a while, unfortunately.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Especially, it seems like in our culture today. I was talking to Andrew Brightbill from 12 Stone yesterday, interviewing him, and he was talking about how much in the church planting landscape, how they have to navigate the various cultures where they plant in churches. And I don't mean campuses; they have a separate church planting arm, and they feel it at 12 Stone, and they're a huge church. And so you can imagine if they're feeling it there, how much more personal you feel it and we feel it as pastors of smaller churches. And Mosaic is not small by any stretch, but in comparison to 20,000 people,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
we do that. So, but you've got a unique challenge there. Even 12 Stone, with it as large as they are, the amount of cultures that are represented in their church is not nearly as diverse as what the culture is there at Mosaic, primarily because you're near Atlanta, but also because you said you were so close to Clarkston, which is a kind of a central location for some African refugees and things like that. How do you navigate that challenge?
Yeah, I wish I had a clear answer to that. There are a few factors that have played into how well things go here at Mosaic. One is that this was going on before I came. It actually started with a family in our church just taking a refugee family under their wings and making sure they had what they needed, going to the school and fighting for them when there was misunderstanding, and that couple actually was a big part of opening the door. And they were very good. They are very good at learning and listening and working hard for the good of others. And so when I came here, that was already working. Also, I'm a learner. I normally don't believe I have a whole lot to bring to the table, but I'm wide open to listen. And I think just being a learner is a really big deal for pastors. The idea that we know it all or we can figure it all out is it's a dumb idea. And so that's one. The other is God's been really, really good to us to bring us Salim Kasanza. He's our multi-ethnic pastor. Salim is from the DRC. He came here as a political refugee, and he's become a close friend. He also has a call to ministry, was involved in the Church of the Nazarene in Kenya when he was sort of between, he's from Congo. And so when he was in Kenya waiting to come, got involved with the Church of the Nazarene. And so I think probably the secret sauce for me is I empower people to lead. And I listen to people. I understand I am not from Congo. I don't even know what that means. I don't know when Salim has told me some of the things they've experienced in their life. I am a white male in America. I have no idea, but I have a heart and I have some ears and I can listen and learn. And so I think empowering people is really, really important, especially when they're better fitted than I am in certain areas. Now, there are two things we use to bring the people together. So I think this is probably the best answer I can give you that's very, very practical. We use worship and food. So we have combined worship nights that are beautiful. French, Swahili, English. We're looking at adding Spanish into the next one. And just beautiful moments where, we may not be singing the same words in the same language, but it's the same tune. And it's just beautiful. We also gather around the table. The table is a very, very important thing to us. One of my favorite things that we do here is called a taste of home. And it's when, wherever you're from, whether it's Congo, Texas, which considers itself to be a different country, wherever you're from, Arkansas, South Carolina, we bring the dish that just everybody there knows about. And we use the dish to tell our stories and to get to know each other.
Our family got to participate in one of those shortly after we came. We were actually part of your launch when you rebranded, when you launched all that. I was very impressed with, you have a gentleman in your congregation, Richie, and he works in the video or Hollywood industry. So he's gifted, very gifted with that video and audio. He did a fantastic job, and he interviewed the various cultures within the church and brought all that to life under that Mosaic brand there. And actually, believe it or not, the name of this podcast, I had this envisioned the first Sunday when you guys did that. I had this envisioned. I even had the name had come to me, Echoes Through Eternity. And you launched that service by saying, Marcus Aurelius said, what is your life, or something about this day will echo through eternity, or something like that.
Yeah, something about the good we do today echoing through the whole eternity.
There you go. And so I thought, well, he's going to think that I copied him when I launched his podcast, but I felt like it was confirmation from the God.
Man, can we
as weird as that sounds,
can we talk about copy? Listen, we are all in this business to lead people to Jesus. No sermon gets preached without hopefully reading from a commentary, hopefully reading from a commentary that somebody's written. And listen, if it builds up the kingdom of God, I say go for it.
Well, that's great. Back to the taste of home. But yes, my kids are both foodies. They enjoy various types of food. And they still talk about all the different tastes that they had that day from the various cultures there.
Yeah.
And I'm a meat and potatoes guy myself, and so I wasn't as adventurous as what some of them were. I did take a little bit of here and there, and I could see that, but I'm not adventurous when it comes to my food. I'll confess that.
Food is, food just gives you an opportunity to have a lot of fun. I was at a gathering with Mosaic one Sunday night not too long ago. It was just the French Swahili congregation, and they were all drinking this drink called ginger beer. I drank ginger ale. I've drank ginger ale, so I'm like, I can do that. I like that. And so they said, "Are you sure you want this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, give it to me." And so I popped it open and I just guzzled it down. Let me tell you something, Jeff, in case you ever need to know this. Ginger beer is not the same as ginger ale. It's not beer. It's not beer, but it is so strong. And sweat started pouring from out of my body, and they just started laughing. And what was fun about that is, food just brought us together. I can't understand everything they say, but I sat with them and I found what I could to connect with them. So, yeah.
We've touched on it just a little bit. We talked about the various cultures and navigating some of the challenges of change and things like that. And those kind of talk about conflict, but I want to kind of begin to talk about conflict specifically. One of the best books I have read on conflict and anything. I am not naturally gifted at resolving conflict. I am naturally gifted at creating conflict.
That's funny.
But not resolving it. And so any knowledge I have on it, I have to look for outside resources, whether it come from other people or books and things like that. And one of the best books I read on it was Crucial Conversations by Joseph Graney, Carrie Patterson, and there's several authors to that. I think those are the primary authors of it. A couple of principles I took away from that book were, one is that conflict is not about winning and losing. If you enter into a conflict with the idea that somebody's got to win, that somebody has to be the victor in that conversation, then that means that somebody's got to be a loser. And that leads to the second one is everyone has to feel safe within the conversation there. And I don't mean safe from violence. And even to stay safe emotionally doesn't necessarily touch it, because that brings the idea of, therapy puppies and llamas and things like that we have to have in the middle of the conversation. I don't mean that. I'm just talking about understanding that we're both seeking the same end in the end of the conversation there. So talk about that a little bit. How we actually, let me back up here. I want to go to a commercial right quick, and because I want to have plenty of time to talk about this on the other end. So let me go to a commercial break, and then we'll come back after that.
Sounds good.
In a building, on a hill, in your home, on a beach, in real life, and online. Multitudes are coming to Christ around the world, but there's a shortage of healthy churches. On every continent of the world, Christians like you have learned exactly how to start a church with DCPI's free, step-by-step training based on God's Word to equip you to reach your community with the good news of Jesus Christ. Dynamic Church Planting International wants to come alongside you or your organization for free. No strings attached, no hidden cost, no subscriptions. We equip you absolutely free. Our mission is to equip servant leaders to plant 5 million churches. Go to dcpi.org for more details. That's dcpi.org.
Welcome back into Echoes Through Eternity. We are interviewing Brad Bellomy from Mosaic Atlanta Church in Lilburn, Georgia. And before the break, we were talking a little bit about conflict and his approach to it. And just wanted to, we were talking at lunch the other day, Brad. One of the things that you said in that lunch was that that about navigating conflict is that you don't avoid conflict. A lot of people think that navigating conflict means that you avoid the conflict. Talk to me a little bit about that.
No, in fact, if we were to be totally honest, I have a strange attraction to conflict, and it's I'm not looking for a fight, but I value tension. Tension is very, very important. And you mentioned before the break, about winning and losing. There's just a core value of mine, a core belief of mine. Well, Stanley Hauerwas said something to the effect, and I'm going to totally botch it, so this is a paraphrase, but made a statement one time that just really took me back for a minute. It said, we're in best position to be like Jesus when we decide we have no rights. And if you stop and think about conflict, if you stop and think about all the times that have been tough for you, I would say probably 100%, but let's just be fair. 90% of those has something to do with you not getting what you thought you deserved, not looking like you won on the, at the end of things, feeling like you were entitled to something that you didn't get, you didn't receive. And, if you look at Jesus, it's not the way of Jesus. And so you talked about people feeling safe. I feel like people feel safe when they feel valued. You can disagree with somebody and value them, and they'll feel safe. In fact, you said you're gifted in creating conflict. I do truly believe that God has given me some natural giftings in dealing with conflict, and that's why sometimes when people ask me, what do you do? I don't really know. I'm continuing to try to figure that out. But I was raised to just believe in the value of people, and I always give people a voice, and I listen. I do not believe that I'm right just because I think I'm right. I have a deep belief in the collective wisdom in from individual conversations to board meetings. The collective wisdom is very, very, very important to pay attention to. So valuing other people is the key to conflict, in my opinion. Conflict resolution. I mean, one of the things that I learned as a staff person under various pastors, I served under great pastors, but one of them taught me that if you give people 10 attaboys, affirmations, they can handle the criticism. But a lot of times leaders only show up when it's time to criticize something. And that's something that's really endemic of church culture, and that needs to be changed. I will tell you that some of the closest friends that I have now from ministry are the people I had the worst conflicts with.
That's good.
That's probably not a clear answer, but
no, it's very, very good. I appreciate that. And it's one of the things that I value about you as an individual that struck me from the very first time we had lunch is the level of authenticity and transparency that you have about yourself, about your own gifts. You're very aware, self-aware of your gifts and strengths and weaknesses. Surround yourself by those who have more strength than what you do, but simultaneously recognize your own gifts and strengths and put those forth to be a part of the collective wisdom, to quote you. But one of the areas that you have been extremely transparent, not just with me, but with your congregation, is with some of your spiritual, ministerial, but especially your struggle with anxiety and burnout. Mm-hmm. Mental health is one of those things that still has a stigma attached to it. And that's especially true within a church. We don't have a good track record of dealing with a lot of issues, but we especially don't have a good track record of dealing with mental health. I've had horror stories, women dealing with postpartum depression and being told they were possessed or unchristian or just need more faith. Just read the Bible a little bit and it's going to solve all your problems. And and those are extreme examples, but still less obvious stigmatization or where pastors are not given opportunities or just generally shadow shamed as just needing to grow closer to the Lord, so to speak. And it's just a generally strong stigmatization stigmatization around
Mhm.
that. So talk to me about your struggles. Obviously, we want to respect your boundaries and privacy, but as much as you can, share those.
Yeah, man, it would be like drinking from a fire hydrant. Let me just give you an overview, and then you can ask more pointed questions if you want. So I'm an only child. I was raised in a really solid family. My parents love me. They supported me. I think one of the things, and yeah, authenticity is important to me, but I struggle to say this one thing because it's going to sound weird. One of my biggest struggles is that I never really failed at much as a kid. And when I went into college, I didn't really fail at much either. And so I never learned how to fail. And a lot of that's because I just didn't try things I wasn't good at. So it's not like I'm good at everything. I'm smart enough
Yeah.
not to try things I'm not great at.
Well, if you ever need a PhD in failure,
No,
talk to
man.
me.
No. Yeah, so when I got into ministry, I'm a perfectionist. I'm an INTJ. My mind never stops. And I worked hard and long. A lot of people will say they work, 80-hour weeks. And, kind of wonder if that was real work or if they were just at the office all that time. But Jeff, I literally just couldn't stop working. In Columbia, when I was family pastor at Columbia First Church of the Nazarene, we lived a mile from the church in an apartment for the first little while. And I'll never forget one night that I said, "Hey, I need to run to the church and grab one of my books, and I'll be right back." And Krista, my wife, she said, "Yeah," she said, "That's fine, but you're not going to be right back." And I'm like, and so I was very determined because she said I wasn't going to be back. I was determined I was going to be right back to make sure to prove her wrong. And I came back at 4 a.m. because I got into the office. I saw things that needed to be done, and I just started doing them. And you know what? Like that kind of drive has led to a lot of success, but 20 years in, it was just too much. I transitioned from staff ministry to a lead pastor in 2015, and I went to pastor a beautiful group of people, but it could be best described as a 2-engine jet with about 5 engines on fire. It was a lot. When I got there, there were about 50 to 55 people, and we had about $700,000 of debt. And I had never been a lead pastor before. And what's interesting, if anybody's out there listening and they're a staff person, and staff people, you have kind of I worked a lot then, but you have a well-defined box to play in, little sandbox to play in. Well, when you're a pastor, a lead pastor, forgive me, all staff people. I did not mean when you're a pastor. I mean when you're a lead pastor. Man, there's just no end to what can be done. And so I went and went and went. There were most weeks when I was in San Antonio, I wasn't positive that I would be getting a paycheck for long. And here's the thing about that 5 years, it was beautiful, like beautiful. God did amazing things there. By the time we left, I like to count monthly attenders rather than just weekly because of the way things are these days. We had 175 to 200 monthly attenders, and never more than 140, 150, at one time. The financial picture had turned around. I mean, things were going great. And the whole time I was dying on the inside. I was stressed. I was anxious. Yeah, it's really hard for me to describe really well what that felt like. There's one story. So I had multiple pulmonary embolisms in 2017, and that physical situation kind of compared with the just the emotional fatigue. I think that started the process of burnout. One day I was in the hospital there, and that was one of those situations where the doctor tells you, you're not sure if you actually go home. And I never had anything like that before. I've never had a surgery or anything before. And so I'm already worried and distraught. And one of the people in my church came to visit, and she's just a great, great lady. She came to check on me. I thought that was so special. It was wonderful. And then I asked a question. My wife was sitting beside me, and I asked a question, and I saw my wife's eyes when I asked it, and she was freaking out. And all I said was, "How are you doing?" And Jeff, for the next hour, I counseled her from my hospital bed.
Oh,
And
wow.
I'll never forget the feeling that I can't even almost die and get away from this. That's what I
Sad.
felt like.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's another day in ministry that sticks out to me. I think any pastor listening might resonate with this. This is how this particular day went. I woke up. We had an event coming. I woke up. I went to the office to do some event planning. And then I went to Party City to buy tablecloths. I got a call while I was in Party City to go to the hospital, where one of our ladies in her 30s, her systems were shutting down for no reason. Like, she was dying. She woke, like, no issues prior to this. And so I leave Party City. I walk into a hospital with this guy and his wife, and she's dying. She's losing her life. And it's it's very stressful and very sad. I left there. I went back to Party City to finish the shopping that I needed to do. Went over to the church and started putting some games together, and got a call that a 4-year-old girl had passed away in the hospital. And I found myself standing in a room over the body of a precious 4-year-old girl. And that day, to me, encapsulates the struggle of ministry for a lot of people. You go from fun event planning to crisis, and if you're not taking care of yourself, and I was not taking care of myself, I was tending to my family. The one thing about burnout for me is, I'm so glad. Part of the burnout was I did take care of my family and I did do my job. I just didn't take care of me. And so my family didn't actually suffer from the burnout. But I went to a very dark place over those next couple of years. We had relatives that got very sick, and it was just really, really hard. And I'm not sure how much detail I want to go into about how dark it was, but I will tell you, Jeff, it was dark. I got to the point where I could not see. I love life. I could not see how the people around me would be okay if I remained in the state that I was in. And that's just a place I'd never been before. I've never been since. So I don't know if you have any questions about that, and I'll talk a little bit about the transition to harvest, because it's nothing short of miraculous.
I forget the saying now. It's a psalm, but it's darkest before the dawn. That's not the
Yeah.
psalm,
Yeah.
but anyway, essentially, that sometimes not that God takes us there, but out of the darkness comes a bright
Yeah.
light. So talk about that transition you had, the gift you received from Harvest at the time, now Mosaic,
Yeah.
and that call to come here.
Yeah, and I will say about San Antonio, if just in case anybody from San Antonio is listening, the church was a wonderful experience. In fact, people didn't really know what was going on. People didn't know. My resignation was a surprise. And I was able, part of the struggle was I was able to get up on Sunday mornings and act like nothing was wrong. And so I have lifelong friends there. Well, I got a call from the district superintendent of the Church of the Nazarene in Georgia, and he asked if I would be interested in talking to a church in Georgia, because I had participated with the Holy Spirit in that turnaround job at San Antonio. And there was a church that did not need a turnaround. It just needed, good solid leadership moving into the future. Well, there were two words that were problematic in that sentence for me, and that was church and Georgia. You put those two things together, and I wasn't interested. I'd been in South Carolina for a long time. I have a racism allergy, and I said no, I don't think I want to do that. And he said, would you come check it out? And I thought, I need a vacation. And so I did. I agreed to come over and spend a weekend here, just get out of town. And when I walked into this church, I don't know, Jeff, there are things you hope and pray for, things your heart just desires, and a body of believers that is able to overcome their differences and do life together. I've always yearned for that. And I saw that when I walked in here, and I thought, oh man, I know what God's about to do. And so we went home, but I was so burnt out that we had 3 family votes. This church, they voted to call us to come. We had 3 family votes, and every time it was 3-1, yes to no. I was the no. My wife and kids were voting. We all knew, but I didn't feel like I had anything to give. And so I ended up, there was this day where I called the DS and I said, hey, I'm really embarrassed about this, but I've allowed myself to go through this whole process, and now they've called me, and I'm just a lot more burnout than maybe I even thought, but I'm way more burnout than I let you think. And I said, I knew I was in such a dark place that it would not be fair. Even if it was good for me, it would not be fair to put that on a church. And so our DS, his name is Kyle, and I said, would it be okay if I call, because authenticity and transparency is so important to me. Would it be okay if I call the board secretary and just tell them what I've told you? And there was that, understandable silence on the other end of the line. And then he said, yeah, that'll be fine. So I called the board secretary. His name is Tom. And I said, Tom, man, I love this church so much. I love what I saw. I've dreamed of being a part of a community like that, but I am so burnt out right now. I'm in a tough place, and I can't do this. And he said, I totally understand. He said, I really appreciate you sharing that with me. And we hung up the phone, and I thought, okay, now I need to work on getting some healing. Didn't know how to do that. About an hour later, Tom calls back, and he says, hey, I've been talking with the board, and we've decided we do believe you should come here, and we want to offer you a paid sabbatical before you come to the church. Now, Jeff, maybe I don't get out much. Have you ever heard of that?
Never heard of that.
I'd never heard of that. And I thought, are you kidding me? And man, there was so much hope that in that one moment, so much hope rose up in me, and I took it. I took that opportunity, and that sabbatical was the turning point in my life. I went into 3 weeks of total isolation. In fact, I left. I preached my last sermon in San Antonio. I drove, and I never forget when I got in the car to drive away. I felt like I was nothing, because at that point I was driving away from my family. I didn't have them around, and I wasn't a pastor during those days. And I felt like I had no identity apart from that. And
It's
so,
a tough place to be.
Yeah, it is. And so I went in, long story short, went into 3 weeks of total isolation, complete isolation. I took Henry Nouwen's advice, and I just got in there, got in the cell, and I fought it out. And it was hellish and liberating all at the same time.
Well, that is so good. In the psalm, I could not remember, was Psalm 35. For his anger lasts only a moment, but his favor lasts a lifetime.
Yeah.
Weeping may last through the night, but joy comes in the morning. Not that God was angry with you.
No.
But certainly we understand that the joy did come in the morning for you. And simultaneously, we recognize that there are still people out there that the joy has not come yet.
Yeah.
That they still are in the struggle. There are still pastors out there that fight silently in the midst of a mental health crisis, and whatever precipitated that. And but you talked about identity, and the pastoral identity runs deep in people. It is a call; it's not an occupation.
Yeah.
And so there's a sense when one is not pastoring, because I've been through that. That if you're not pastoring, that you are nobody. That basically you're useless to God. And if you're useless to God, why would you be useful for anything else, for any other purpose there?
Yeah.
And so it takes hard work. It takes a lot of prayer, journaling, and to recognize that your identity is not in what you do for God, but simply in who you are in Christ.
Yeah. If I could, for any pastors listening, if I could identify a few things that I think would be helpful. When I came, it was a 6-week sabbatical. After that 3 weeks of isolation, I came back home to wash clothes, repack, and then do some intentional things. I came back to San Antonio. I went to sleep, and I woke up the next morning, and I thought, man, I've got the whole day to myself. I mean, I was rejuvenated. What do I like to do around here? And after 5 years, Jeff, I had no idea, because I had never taken the time to do anything for myself. And so I would say that, these are the mistakes I made. One, I did not care for myself. I didn't take Sabbath seriously. I took myself too seriously. So taking care of myself and finding enjoyment is something that I do now. And taking an off day, that's not a question now. Also, having a mentor. I had a mentor through that process. Having a mentor is critical. It's so critical. And just understanding that the world's not going to fall apart if you take the time to seek the help that you need and the growth that the church doesn't rest on your shoulders. Carlo Corretto said the church rests on the shoulders of Christ.
That's good. You mentioned self-care there. And one of the things that strikes me as pastors, and I had never really thought about it, but my mom is a licensed professional counselor. They require, when they're going through their internship and then later residency, they are required to go to, they had a name for the Pastoral Institute, I don't remember, but essentially it's a debriefing. So they have a group time where they're there with their supervisor, and they're listening to what they've said, and they recount. My mom said that the supervisor is less interested in what they say and more interested in why they say what they say. And even today, my mother, she still maintains that contact with her mentor to kind of talk with him through these things. Otherwise, she says when she goes into the counseling room, she ends up projecting her own stuff onto them, and we do that as pastors, but why don't we, does our ministry, our DSs and leadership, why don't they require us to have mentors? That just strikes me.
Yeah. I'm personally friends with a few DSs, a good many DSs actually. And I think that the job is I think it's the same issue at that level as it is in a local church that's not huge. There's not enough money to go around, not enough time to go around. One thing I'm doing now even is I'm involved in mentoring pastors, and I'm not charging them for that. I mean, I am trying to be for other people the person I needed. But I think it's just challenging. DSs have a really interesting load, but I do agree with you that it needs to be attended to, and we need to figure out how to create an environment in which pastors can be vulnerable and authentic, voice their struggle, and find help.
Right. I know that they are, for those that are coming up through ministry, that they are pairing them with mentors.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
been something that's needed for a long time.
Yeah.
The people that you are mentoring are blessed.
I don't know about that.
We'll get lots of good, valuable feedback out of that.
Yeah.
Brad, it has been fantastic talking with you. And
you too, man.
I'm glad we finally got to connect, and other people could hear that wisdom and profundity. I did want to say this. I was struck last night. I don't always attend on Wednesday nights because you're about 30 miles from where I live, and my daughter and wife are already in that area, and so I have to bring a separate car with gas prices at $4 a gallon.
Yeah,
it's just, just a way to save some money. But I did come last night,
right?
And you thought nothing about it, but I thought how indicative of Brad Bellomy. But you had this picture on your Zoom profile or something, and you said, "How cool of a picture is that?" One side of your face was shadowed.
Yep.
One side of your face was light. It looked like something out of DC Comics with Two-Face there.
I think it is.
And you said, "That's my favorite picture."
I think it is so awesome that you noticed that. That's intention. I love that picture for a reason. And it's because we have to be aware of our shadow side. We have to constantly give that to the Lord, invite the Holy Spirit into that. And we all have struggles. My life is wonderful, Jeff. Even with that period of burnout, I've had a wonderful life, wonderful ministry. But yeah, the idea that we're just all light all the time, that's crazy. I love it. It amps me up that you noticed that about that picture. That's my favorite photo.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, like I said, it's been great having you here today, and blessings to you and your ministry, and just continued success.
Yeah, I'm so glad our paths have crossed. I'm so thankful to the Lord for bringing you and your family our way.
Thank you. Well, thanks again for joining us today on Echoes Through Eternity and listening to Reverend Brad Bellomy and how God is echoing his life through eternity. We'd ask if you enjoy this content, share it with a friend, like and subscribe anywhere you find podcasts. This was the last episode of season 1. We may have a bonus episode, so stay tuned, subscribe so you don't miss anything. In the meantime, we'll see you in season 2.